Beautiful, isn't it? You know, I don't know what it is, but sometimes when I'm out walking these hills, I just feel like breaking into a song from the Sound of Music. I'll spare you the discomfort. In Alberta, vast tracts of land are classified as rangeland. More than 16 million acres, some folks say. Now, I don't imagine too many Albertans give too much thought to rangelands, but I'll bet if you ask some, many of them would say that these lands are just a step shy of being wasteland. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Rangelands are a tremendous resource. These forage-producing lands have sustained our livestock production for decades. But that's not all. Rangelands provide food and habitats for fish and wildlife as well. They're a source of water, a source of wood, and a source of gas, oil, and minerals. For many people, rangelands are a source of recreation, even if all they do is look at them as they drive by in a car, truck, or bus. So rangeland needs to be protected. Now that doesn't mean it shouldn't be grazed. What it does mean is that it shouldn't be overgrazed. Overgrazing damages the land, reduces its productivity. Wildlife suffer, and so does the aesthetic and recreational appeal of the land. For the rancher, protecting rangeland means range management. Range management is a common-sense approach to grazing that helps ranchers maintain, restore, and enhance the productivity of their rangelands. Productive rangelands depend on healthy, vigorous plants that protect the soil. On the southern ranges, no plants can match the deep, fibrous-rooted perennial grasses for building and maintaining soil. If there's moisture or nutrients in the ground, these plants will seek it out and trap it. As well, these plants are an excellent source of forage. In some areas, they provide 90% of the grazing requirements. Managing these nutrient-rich plants effectively maintains the integrity of these lands. It also sustains forage yields year after year, no matter what the weather, wet or dry. Even during drought, it provides a cushion. For the rancher, that's something to bank on. But mismanaging these plants means unstable yields. It can also damage the soil, making for unsightly, water and nutrient-poor fields. Another way to mismanage these plants is to graze them early when their energy reserves are low. This puts a tremendous amount of stress on the plant, something it may not recover from, even if it isn't grazed for the rest of the year. Another way to mismanage these plants is to graze them heavily. Heavy grazing takes too much growth, leaving little to feed the roots. As the roots suffer, so do the plants. Eventually, they'll die. Sure, there will be others to replace them. Nature just hates a vacuum. But the replacement plants won't provide as much forage for your livestock. The root systems of these plants are shallower. As a result, they don't sustain nor hold the soil together as well. Wind and water erosion can result. And if it does, the quality of subsequent plants further diminishes. A dry year makes matters worse. With inferior root systems, these plants will die off, subjecting the soil to even more wind and water erosion. Eventually, you're left with inedible plants or plants too short to graze. Heavy grazing also reduces plant cover. Consequently, any moisture that falls is more likely to run off and less likely to soak into the ground, where it's needed most. That's a big problem here in the south, where it's tremendously important to take advantage of every little bit of moisture that comes naturally. A third way to mismanage these plants is to graze them frequently. Little rest between grazings leaves no time for the plant to recover. What regrowth there is clipped when it's needed to fuel the recovery. This too taxes the roots of the plants to the point where they'll eventually die out. So here on the southern ranges, range management means reducing the stresses that come from grazing too early, from grazing too much, and from grazing too often. But before anyone can embark on a range management program, they need to know their fields, know the condition they're already in, whether poor or fair, or good to excellent. On native grasslands, the big, deep-rooted plants are the ones that give us the best forage, both in quality and yield. Good to excellent ranges will be dominated by these plants. But graze them early, heavily, or often, and you'll find the deep-rooted plants being replaced by shallow-rooted plants. If they dominate, you're looking at a range in fair condition. Under severe grazing pressure, weeds come in, and when they take over, you've got yourself a poor range. Yes, you may have to get down on your hands and knees to assess a field, but not for long. Fortunately, the southern grasslands have been studied for years and years, and these benchmark tables and field sheets are the result. You'll find them in the stocking guide. They make it very easy for southern ranchers to assess the condition of their fields. Assessing your range land is absolutely essential. It's the first step towards maintaining or improving them. And later, once you've begun a range management program, regular assessments will help you determine whether or not you're moving towards a healthy, productive range. Examined closely, range management comes down to 4 principles: proper stocking, good distribution, deferred spring grazing, and effective rest. Overstocking is the most common cause of poor ranges. Put too many cows on a field for too long, no matter what its condition, and the result is the same: overgrazing. They'll take too much plant material, leaving nothing for the plant to feed itself or to cover the soil. Stocking rates are expressed in AUMs, that's animal unit months, with 1 AUM being the amount of forage one animal requires in a month. Assuming a 1,000-pound cow with or without calf eats 26 pounds of forage a day, plus an allowance for trampling and waste, 1 AUM is equal to 1,000 pounds of dry forage a month. By knowing the size and condition of your fields and the number of animal units you have, and remember, it's animal units and not animals, because of course the larger the animal, the more feed it consumes. But by knowing this, you can determine whether or not you're overgrazing, or for that matter, whether or not you're undergrazing. All the information is here in the stocking guide. Here you'll find stocking rates. These, together with your own grazing records and regular monitoring of your fields, will ensure good residue and soil cover. Given a choice, cattle tend to the tastier plants, or the ones that are more accessible, or the ones that are closer to water and salt. Consequently, any field that gives cattle a choice is a field that's subject to overgrazing by distribution. Look at this field, for example. No matter how good the forage, it'd take some work for these cows to get up to this area. And besides, there's no water or salt. So why bother leaving this area down here? As a result, even though this whole pasture is rated for 100 AUMs, that many cattle would overgraze it if all they do is stay in this area. The key to effective livestock distribution is field design. Rangelands shouldn't be fenced into tidy little squares, but should be fenced according to topography and forage types. If you want cattle to graze harder to get at areas, entice them with water, salt, and other supplements. Put your imagination to work, but be prepared for some trial and error. Springtime in southern Alberta. The long winter is over. The fields are starting to turn green. Good thing, too, forage supplies are low. So what do you do with your cattle? One thing you shouldn't do is turn stock in on native pastures too early. Spring is a critical season for native plants, extremely critical. That's when 2/3 of their growth takes place. Graze these plants too early and they won't reach their potential. But if you hold off until the range is ready, mid-May to early June, and they'll provide you a much more productive forage. So what should you graze your cattle on in the spring? Tame pastures. They're one way to sustain your cattle during the spring season. Annual or perennial forages are well suited for early grazing. As for the cost, keep this in mind. 1 day of delayed grazing in the spring buys you 2 or 3 days of grazing near the end of the growing season. All plants need a rest after grazing. But for that rest to be effective, it has to be provided under good growing conditions. Take this foothills field, for example. Let's say after grazing we give it 6 weeks rest. If there's moisture and good growing conditions, this rest will be effective. But if there's no moisture or it's late in the growing season, this rest won't be effective. So you see, effective rest is not just a matter of time. For a rest to be truly effective, good growing conditions must be present. Now let's recap. We've identified 4 range management principles: proper stocking, balanced distribution, deferred spring grazing, and effective rest. But what do we do with these principles? How do we put them into effect? The answer is grazing systems. At their simplest, grazing systems are nothing more than schedules indicating when and where livestock are to graze. Rangelands, native plant communities that depend on management for their survival. The responsibility is ours. Let's show that we're up to it.